Alright guys, how you doing? It's Rabea, hope you're all doing well. So as you can guess by the title of this video, I wanted to open a discussion, or at least continue a discussion that's been ongoing for quite some time, which is this toss-up between real amps or modelers, digital or analog, you know, this kind of thing. Because I feel like I have a little bit of experience in the world of both of these things over the last few years, having the opportunity to play and tour with both, you know. Traditionally, I'm an amp guy. I've used amps for the longest time from when I started playing guitar, started in bands and stuff. I've always had amplifiers, valve amplifiers, never really took a look at anything digital, any modeling of any kind, just because I like to keep things simple back in the day. You know, I would have an amplifier with a couple of Boss delays, a phaser, and that was it. I used to have a little BCB 30 pedal board with 3 Boss pedals on it, and then my JVM, and that was literally all I used. And then over the years, obviously, that got more and more intense, the more the music required different tones and sounds. In Tosca, for example, the board grew to a huge size, which it still is, and I used 2 amplifiers, and I felt like, you know, I was finding all the tones I'd ever need within that, you know, whether it's the delay and the reverbs, the fuzzes, the modulations, the overdrives. I could get that from my 2 Krakens and my pedal board situation, using a gig rig to switch between everything. And then fast forward a couple more years, I needed to use modelers for, you know, like the Frog Leap gig. I needed to use, you know, a Helix and a Variax to be able to do all the tunings throughout the songs and very specific sounds, because we were trying to recreate Leo's productions. So he would, you know, because majority of what he did's in the studio, a lot of the time when you're producing music, you're going for very specific sounds that work as layerings and as textures in your songs. So that's where the modeler was important, outside of needing the tunings, because I could sort of produce and dial in these specific tones for the songs and try and recreate them as close to the records as possible. And I think that right there starts me off in the position that I'm in currently, which is where I have a very dedicated use for both. I'm right in the middle between modelers and amplifiers, and I see benefits in both camps. And I think it's really important to know exactly what it is that you need it for. So for example, in Vower, I should be using a combination of both. I should be using a modeler like this, my QC, and I should be using an amplifier like the Kraken. And the reason that I'll probably end up using both is because, on one hand, I love the projection and the power of an amplifier. You know, when you're shifting air through a cabinet and it's filling the room, that's a really, really satisfying experience. It doesn't matter what kind of music you play, whether it's high gain, whether it's bluesy, metal, like jazz, whatever. Like, if you've got an amplifier that's shifting air through the cabinet, it's a nice feeling. I love when I listen to my delay, reverb, fuzzy rig through an amplifier in the room, and it fills the room and it gives me that immersive, like swimming in the sound feeling. That is something that really amplifiers can do. In the sense that its dedicated job is to amplify. Now, of course, you can use a modeler, you can put this through the effects return and project through the valve power section coming out of a cab and get a similar experience, you know. That's very possible. So it's funny because that's basically where I'm sat. Like, I will probably use a combination of a modeler through an amplifier, project it, but then I will switch over to the preamp and the amplifier and use different pedals for that too. And I think that somehow along the way it's one or the other, which I'm a bit confused on. I think my opinion is very much a case of what is the purpose for you? Like, what do you specifically need it to do? A lot of people nowadays in the modern guitar community, They don't need lots of power, they don't need lots of amplification, they just need to recreate the tones that they've recorded at home. Because a lot of modern guitar players write and record at home. They don't have the luxury of turning up amplifiers at home because it's really loud. You know, that could be seen as one of the downsides of amplifiers, which I fully agree with. They're really loud. Like this amplifier, this valve amplifier here, is really loud. And thankfully I've got my own studio where I can turn it up. But if I was living at home, there's no way that I could turn up a valve amplifier through a cab at home and not expect to get complaints, because, or to get it to a level where it really does come into its own, because everybody knows valve amps turned down sound a bit naff. So there are a lot of bedroom guitar players, bedroom producers, these musicians and artists that start in their bedroom and then they evolve into performing musicians from there, that have always used plugins and modelers. And I think the beauty of modelers and digital products is that you can really fine tweak and produce your sound and then recreate that produced sound perfectly in a live application. So for example, with this, I can say that I want, I don't know, I could say that I want like a high gain tone with lots of reverb and delay, some reverb in the front, maybe switch in and out certain pedals. Now, of course, I could do that on this rig, but I would say that there's almost a elevated amount of control that you can have with these now, in the sense that, and I'm talking specifically about this, and you can do it on other modelers, but obviously my preference is this. The QC, I can go in and use a EQ block before or after the amp or in between or whatever, and really dial in or out the things that I need for the sound, and then record it, get it on record, be happy with the sound, and then if I go to play live, I'll literally load up that preset and it's good to go. However, I have seen and heard bands live where they've used modeled sounds that they've recorded with at home that they're really happy with, but then when they go and play live and they just use the same tone, it actually doesn't sound very good. It doesn't translate to a live context. You know, like I've seen bands that, you know, heavy bands that use these really awesome, disgusting high gain tones. On the record sounds fantastic, but then live it's just too hissy and too fizzy or whatever. Like, I don't know, like it doesn't translate well, and then I think that's a shame. However, when I saw a band like Carnival live and they're all amps and pedals, even though they've got axe effects on stage as well for certain effects and stuff, having a cabinet that roars on stage and gives you that like low end power, it blended in with the sound through the PA, like those mics on the cabs, it's coming out the PA, but the cab's roaring as well, and it almost provides that support to the overall thickness and integrity of the tone live. And Carnival was probably the last big band that I saw doing that, and I was like, you know what, that is where I want to go with it, because yes, using modelers is great for that recorded tone that you want to recreate, but if you can amplify that through cabs as well, then you get that inherent low mid-range thump that cabinets offer that give you and provide you with that support. And also it's great for harmonic feedback on stage. You can turn around and lean into the cab, and it gives you that support from behind that you can hear the guitar sound, you know, really coming across on stage as well. You know, even if you run in ears, like I do in Frog Leap, it's a silent stage. It's literally a modeler in ears. If I take them out, I can't hear myself. I can only hear what's coming out the front of the house. So 9 times out of 10, I have to stick to the in-ear mix, which is fine. I mean, I do have the guitar sound coming through a monitor wedge when we use them, but I know for a fact in Vower, I definitely want to have an amp on stage as well. Now, there are obviously different contexts. If you don't play live, you don't tour, you're not into that, then there's really not really much use to have a cranked amplifier at home. There's just not. So it's probably more, unless that's what you want, of course. Now, that's great. If you want that and you've got the facility to use that, then awesome. But 9 times out of 10, what you probably find is that people will use a modeler because you can emulate the sounds of cranked amplifiers and you can add all these other elements to really enjoy the guitar sound. I guess the next thing to consider is like, do you prefer hearing guitar sounds through cabinets or through studio monitors? Because from my experience, I've, you know, for the longest time used them through cabinets and gotten used to that. And then over the last maybe 3 years, 4 years, I've become way more accustomed to listening to guitar sounds through studio monitors, and I enjoy both. I would say studio monitors don't necessarily give you that harmonic feedback and that rich sort of push and pull and shifting air experience that a cab does, but it most certainly gives you a great quality tone that you can turn your monitors up a little bit and get that stereo image and feel immersed in it that way. Now, I've done that for the longest time, and I really enjoy that. And as somebody that goes into the studio with bands a lot and records records, 9 times out of 10 as a band member, when you're tracking, you're going to be sat in the control room with the cab mic'd up in the other room or whatever, listening to it through studio monitors that way. So I feel like it's kind of swings and roundabouts at that point. If that's what you do with your music, if you go out there and make records and perform them, when you are recording, you're going to be sat in the control room listening through studio monitors. So it really comes down to what you prefer at that point. For me, I enjoy both. I would say that nowadays I'm almost more accustomed to listening to things through studio monitors because that's where I find myself being a lot more of the time. However, I'm not afraid to go near a cranked amplifier and rip and enjoy that experience. I still enjoy that experience just as much. I guess the last port of call I want to touch on is flexibility of the rig, or how expansive it can be. Now, because I like to produce the guitar tones that I use, whether it's through an amp or a modeler, like I said, when I was in Tosca, I had very specific guitar tones. I found that the pedal board started to grow and I needed a switcher to be able to control all this, load up different presets of pedals patched in and out with the amplifier. In essence, that's what a modeler does. You load your presets, it's got lots of different tones in it and different sounds that you like to use, and then you play that. That's kind of what I'm doing here, is like an analog version. I've got a gig rig switcher that controls MIDI for all the Strymon stuff. I patch in my fuzzes and my overdrives, and then it changes the channel on the amplifiers, and it all blends together and gives me all my different presets. However, where a modeler exceeds the analog realm is that you can change the amp models, which you can't do really that easily on the fly with a traditional analog rig. So for example, I might want to use like I don't know, like a AC 30 clean tone or a Fender Twin clean tone, but then I might want to switch over to, like Kraken high gain or Mesa or whatever amp high gain you like, and then I might want to switch over to something like a Blues Junior or whatever kind of different amplifiers there are out there. You might want to use all of those within your composition or your performance, which you can't really do that easily unless you've got loads of amplifiers and a switcher that's sophisticated enough to move between all of those. Whereas in a modeler, you can do that. You can create presets that move between different scenes, that activate different amplifier models and pedal combinations, and you can be way more expansive with something like this than you can with something like this. And I think that that's again where the point is. With an amplifier, you have a very set group of tones. In this amplifier, I have a JCM 900 style gain 1, 5150 style gain 2. That's it. That's what it does. It sounds like that. I can't change the way it sounds. Like, aside from adding pedals and different combinations of pedals that will manipulate it, fundamentally that's what I've got in there. The palette of amp tones I've got in there is that. If you use like a Soldano, the same thing there. If you use a Fender Twin, the same thing there. It does that thing. Modelers do everything. That's the difference. You can change all of those parameters however which way you want. You can dial them in however which way you want. You can manipulate them in so many different ways and not run the risk of breaking an amplifier. By adding pedals or different devices in certain orders, which you couldn't necessarily do that easily without lots of cabling. That's the difference. So I think there are strengths in both. I think there's more flexibility and it's more expansive using a modeler. However, you sort of sacrifice some of the user experience because it's not like shifting air and it's not like giving you that big epic thing that amps do. And this is somebody that uses both. This is my opinion. This is more flexible, it's more expansive. I can produce more with this, the guitar tones that I want. This gives me a better sonic experience in the room because it's shifting air through the cab. And if you've got a big pedal board with loads of stuff on it, then you've got flexibility, but there is a limit to that because it's based on what the amplifier does specifically and the pedals that you've chosen to use. So that's why I'm right in the middle. I want to use both, because I feel like in Vowel specifically, there are going to be tones that it's just straight up like amp tones with a bit of delay or whatever, a bit of fuzz, and I can do that with this. However, there are synth layers, there are all sorts of different affected layers, whether it's using like a rotary Leslie cabinet or it's using like delay in front of the amp or whatever that I can't easily switch in and out, or it's easier to put a delay in front of the amp and then EQ it very specifically to fit in the mix. Then I will find that this is more useful for that. And I'm going to use both in the sense that I'm probably going to create a rig that utilizes switching between my amp for my core tone and then switching to this for very specific needs throughout the set. It's going to be quite an in-depth rig. And then the other thing to say is it's all well and good me sat here with this gear available to me. You know, I can imagine some of you going, yeah, well, it's fine for you. You've got it all. You've got all this gear sat here. You can use whatever you want. I get that, but the point in this video was for me to maybe shed a little bit of light on my opinion on the overall state of play right now between modelers and amplifiers. And if you're sort of stuck on the fence and you can't decide what's going to work better for you, maybe this video will give you a little bit of help in working that out. If you want the user experience and the flexibility and being expansive in the production of tone, very specifically for your compositions, I would suggest a modeler. If you want the sonic experience and the raw epicness and that feeling that you're really shifting air and you're really kind of manipulating real life analog gear, and it's really coming down to that relationship between all of that working together to provide that sound, then I would go with an amp. I've gotten great results with both and I love using both. So there you go. This video has probably had a lot of rambling, but I hope it's helped you guys out a little bit. Last thing I'll say is it's not one or the other. Don't look at amps and think they're not good enough, they're not as good as modelers. And don't look at modelers and go, oh, it's too digital, it doesn't feel sound right. It's down to what you need for your playing situation as a musician, as a guitar player, as a songwriter, as a band member, what it is that works best for your needs. That's the point. It's not what's better. It's not what sounds better. It's not anything to do with that. Fed up of hearing that online. Just go with what makes you feel great about what you do. I'll see you soon.